Welcome. It's fair use. Welcome, and I've got a book to share with you today. The Living Soil. If you're anything like my family, then you come from a long line of gardeners who produced much of their own food very close to home, which is the normal way our ancestors have always done things, and has been fairly reliable. So we learn the principles of gardening from somebody like Hugh Johnson. We wonder, can we trust this Johnson fellow? He talks about what? The living soil and different soil types. When gardeners are not complaining about the weather, he's grumbling about his soil. It's not, however, quite such an arbitrary despot. Unlike the weather, soil can be improved. So we're talking about soil improvement. So that leads me to believe that this is a book that's a little bit more trustworthy in terms of its efficacy, because he's talking about different types of soil. You might have peat, sandy, clay, or chalk soil, and there are differences, as you can see, in what it looks like in a cylinder full of water. So, as we flip through this, we look at climate and the gardener. We can find great books like this in the library, of course, and one of the great places to find it is on your own bookshelf if your family keeps gardening books, which my family keeps stacks and stacks of them. So, in addition to gardening books that tell you all about the different climates that are there, the different growing zones, of course, that are very famous, you also have books like these that are communist gardening, with gay, heterosexual, multicultural type of gardening, and what a great you're just fawning over what a great generous farmer this man is. And so, that's absolutely trash. However, it does tell you certain things that you might be able to get some useful ideas. Just don't walk in the counsel ungodly. You also have the Victory Garden, Thomas Worth, and there are Jewish names all over this book. So be careful what you select because there are a lot of lies out there about how hard it is, how much work it is. They make it harder than it is. So make sure that you can, just through common sense, sometimes that's enough to sort the... It is telling you to do something really complicated, sophisticated that scares you away from gardening. You don't have to... it's fairly simple. Plants are forgiving enough that if you're within, if you're within a couple of zones, it might work out. Give it a try, see, and then you'll know. But with gardening, it's sort of an extension of self-sufficiency, sort of an extension of survival. And so let's look at survival. The United States Army, from the government printing office. Okay, we've got reprints and things. U.S. Army Survival Manual gives you the basics. It reminds me of the Boy Scout Field Book, which is different than the Boy Scout Manual. So the Boy Scout Field Book is an excellent, excellent work along these lines. And it has pictures of various plants and things that are poisonous and that kind of thing. How to signal an aircraft, make your own fire hole, polluted water potable. In other words, you can drink the polluted water. How to make a still, a solar still is one way to make water. It's just really slow, but you can, of course, boil water. You can clean it, filter it, and then boil it. Okay, then we have the Air Force Survival and Training from the Government Printing Office as well. Okay, so we have survival training, AFR. Very plain looking, but the kind of thing they issue in the military. So, if you want to survive and return with honor, in 1985, Department of the Air Force published this. You can flip through this. One of the things people don't do is they don't immediately flip through, get an overview what kind of stuff is in the book. So it's like, some of this stuff you need to have money, you need to have equipment and training in order to be able to survive. But some of it is how to use a flint and almost nothing else to start a fire. What I figured out from watching enough videos is they're based on these kinds of books and these kind of trainings. So you will get, look at that. That is a water filter with grass on the top, sanded charcoal. You pour the dirty water on top, filters out the nastiness through the layers of fabric, through layers of grass, sand, and charcoal. What comes out the bottom is something you can boil and drink. Okay, so I've seen people do this in a bottle on YouTube, and this is a great source of survivalist type of videos that some of them it's worthy of making a video on YouTube, some it's not. So digging a hole 3 feet from a swamp in order to get filtered water, well, that's one of the ways of filtering the water through the sand that's already there. So very quick way to filter water, and then of course you could boil it or build a solar still or something along those lines. And so we have all of these different ways of creating little shelters and things, natural shelters, the types of things that you might imagine, and things that you wouldn't imagine. How to make a pair of boots out of a moose hawk and things like that. So it really goes into a lot of detail. Basics that you might already know 10, 20, 30% of what's in here. The knot tying and things. You might already know this for your Boy Scout years or survival training or first aid and things like that, how to sharpen knives and things. What this does, though, the value of it is it gets everybody on the same page. And one of my favorites I found in the field book is a shelter just like this one. So the Boy Scout field book actually tells you a lot of the same information that's in these U.S. Army and U.S. Air Force manuals. So with the Air Force, you might be parachuting into an area. And so they take some time to show you how to make a roof, okay, out of just whatever the heck you have in your environment, whatever you have that you brought with you. It's beautiful. And we've got some of the modern technology for the time. Back in 1985, they had the thermal cameras, right? So things that you wouldn't expect. Some of the cutting edge, expensive stuff, how long you're going to survive in water. If it's below 60 degrees, yeah, you're screwed. If it's above 60 degrees, you're going to be eaten by sharks, you know? So it's like that. But you'll know that basically if the water is about freezing, you got to get people out of there fast. Like 10 minutes or they're dead. Okay, so, and 40 degrees, it's no better. 50 degrees, maybe you got a half hour to 45 minutes before they're unconscious and probably drown. And then there's 100% expectation if you go in just 50 degree water, like the Puget Sound is in the summertime. It's 50 degrees in there, and you're in there 3 hours, you're dead. They're going to call off the search. Because you're definitely dead, you know, if you stayed in the water that long. Maybe you swam to shore, in which case, if your boat sank close enough to shore, they come looking for you. Maybe you're still alive. But they'll use this chart to figure out who should we try to rescue and should we burn the fuel trying to find them or not. The science has been done. But incidentally, we got some of that science in World War II, I believe, from the Japanese, who just threw people out in the cold and saw how long they would live. And that's some of the information that we used to purchase some sort of, I guess they were purchasing, using scientific information to win their freedom. So these scientists did horrible things to people. I think it was the Japanese. It might have been somebody else. All right. But anyway, then we have natural vegetation regions. Okay, so these are useful. What kind of vegetation did you find? We'll have things like what's poisonous, what's not. This I found was an interesting. Just the different climates. I've seen a very similar chart to this very recently. These are sort of plant zones, and the plants know what kind of climate you have. Hot and humid, hot and dry. Cold and humid, you know, and cold and dry in the mountains here. So that, you know, just various different climate zones for different kind of plants, different types of plants will grow in different types of places. You wonder, hey, can I grow the same thing in Southern California as I can in the Seattle region or up here? Well, maybe it's Mediterranean climate, so certain of the plants will grow in those different zones and some will not. So this is kind of a useful way of breaking up the world into major, like, regions in order to figure out exactly what kind of survival course do you need for that region. How many survival courses do we need? Well, we need probably 7 different modules or several different how to survive in the highlands, ice climates, snow climates, warm temperature climates, dry, and tropical. Right? So you would need different sections of a course because the survival techniques are going to be different depending where you are. Anyway, great to have these kind of books. So when you're going beyond just surviving building a temporary shelter, you can, of course, dig a hole under a tree and have, in some ways, it's a better house to live in than the house that you're living in now. But you could take that as a temporary shelter and build your house living under a tree for a while, parachuting into some area, and not only survive, but learn how to find food, forage for food, and then plant food that you can use to survive. And then you would move on to, of course, more gardening books, things like that, like this, and learn how you would design a garden. Now, a lot of this stuff that's very orderly over here, it's far away from the kitchen. There's a solarium here on the house. The solarium can help heat your house. It's sort of an attached greenhouse. So that can be your nursery. But some of these things, if you use it frequently, it should be close to your house. It'd be Zone 1. It'd be Permaculture Design by Mollison, who doesn't love you. Let me put it that way. Yeah, Bill Mollison came up with permaculture for some nefarious reason, but of course we can spot some of the traps and walk safely by if we instead do things according to the way the Bible tells us to do it, instead of doing it Mollison's way. All right, now we have some blonde Aryan bowl cuts over here in their goose-stepping military boots, helping their family, helping their dad. There's love between the son and the father here. This is obviously a picture you're never going to find in a communist book ever, so that tells us the quality of this book and who it's for and whether or not the author loves you or not, right? So you could very quickly spot these leftist commie nonsense. And we can look at various root structures and soil structures and different ways of irrigating things and different buried drip irrigation, buried irrigation, and things like that. And we'll also see that it's good to have slaves and slavery. Look at all the slaves working on your plantation. No, of course not. But you would, again, never, ever see something like this portrayed in a positive light in a communist book. They're just not going to do it. So you may as well be looking at, when you're looking over here at the chemistry of the soil, the life of the soil, you are... Well, they're burning stuff. The leftists would never say, hey, it's a good idea to burn something down and scatter the ashes on your garden. It works well. And there would never be a positive portrayal of a white man in a suit. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so that tells you. These are clues. These are dog whistles, if you will. And so there are a lot of predators in your garden that eat the aphids, that eat the wasps or tent caterpillars. The wasps will eat the tent caterpillars and things like that. When you get some of these old books, if it's a good one, then it will give you a lot of information. If the author, you can find out whether they're well intentioned, whether they are deceived. You can quickly track down which is which. It's not hard to do. In a communist book, this would be a picture of a black farmer. Okay. Not a white farmer, not a white gardener. Okay, there are never any positive portrayals of white people, right? Over here, we're honoring these white people from the ancient times, the Swedes and the Europeans, and the whole history of how, the families of plants and things like that. So you can find some extremely good information in here in people who are actually trying to reveal the truth, explain it in ways that you can understand, so you'll know exactly the way things work to the best of their knowledge, not a bunch of fancy freaking theory like you get in university, but like, here's what it looks like. Here's how it scales up. Here's how you control growth when you have like vines and stuff. Here's how, look at the order. Everything orderly, one after another, columns and columns of stuff, instead of some disordered mess into some food forest that the enemy would recommend to you. So we have here something that is a resource which paints bees in a positive light. We don't want them Africanized and things like that. You'll get better quality of information than you will from a lot of the mass media. So I would say that this is the kind of book that you're looking for. It has lots of pictures because it really wants you to, it hopes that you will succeed and prosper. It hopes that you are successful as a gardener. Okay, so it's not just the amount of the information that's in here, which it's massive, but it's also the quality of the information that's in here, which is priceless. It's the best quality of information. It is visionary, it is bold, it's majestic, and it wants us to live in a better world. So that's why it gives you the principles of gardening, kind of like the laws of gardening from people who love the law, right? They love the principles. This is a white people book. So I recommend these kinds of books when you can find them, and especially like this one is an excellent way. It talks about it gives you a great overview, stuff you can't easily get on YouTube. You can quickly flip to your reference guide, and you got acres and acres of different kinds of plants identified exactly and laid out in a form. Makes it easy to understand how this all fits together. You can form your own theories from the information that's provided here, and is so much is underlined. Pages are dog-eared because it's so useful. Many ornamentals and a lot of food, and different ways of growing vines, which adds energy efficiency to the home if you surround your house with certain kinds of hedges and things. And all these cottages that were made out of stone or brick and had ivy climbing up them for a reason. You wanted to have climbing plants because it contributed to the energy envelope of your home, and it made it much more pleasant to be in and just more beautiful in every way. And this is about gardening for beauty. And so one of the most beautiful gardens I've ever been to is Bouchard Gardens up in Victoria, Canada. And they might want to take all the beauty and meaning, suck all the beauty and meaning out of the world, but this book wants to capture it and preserve it forever. So that's one of the great things about great books. It might be on your bookshelf, or it might be on a library bookshelf that you can find this kind of stuff. So I'd recommend you go and look for sources of information like this, even if it's older, especially if it's older, because we haven't been allowed to publish this kind of stuff for quite a while, as you can imagine. Like, this is way too glorious to be allowed near any school anywhere in America. Just won't happen.